Sometimes in my Dhamma talks, I try to start with something contemporary and practical and move on to the profound. Today, we're going to start with the profound and move on to the practical. So, I'm going to be giving some reflections on the heartwood of the Bodhi tree. Have you ever heard reflections on the heartwood of the Bodhi tree? Well, you see, a Bodhi tree is a softwood, so it doesn't have any heartwood. It's a teaching on emptiness. There's a famous talk or book by Ajahn Buddhadasa, very respected Thai scholar. Venerable Sariputta, foremost disciple in wisdom, equal in wisdom to Lord Buddha, sometimes used to delight in a meditation called abiding in voidness. Just as we have the Brahma Viharas, this is the Sunyata Vihara, emptiness, abiding. Lord Buddha once remarked upon Venerable Sariputta's radiant features and asked him by which state of mind this radiance had been caused, and Venerable Sariputta replied that he frequently practiced the abiding in voidness, upon which the Buddha said that this was the abode of great men and proceeded to describe it in detail. So, to have one's radiance praised by the Buddha is no small thing. There was an occasion in Sariputta's life where he was meditating upon this, and apparently 10,000 Brahma Devas came to venerate and praise Venerable Sariputta. The interesting thing is that in their statement of praise they said, "We do not know upon which the Venerable meditates." But the radiance was so vast that it attracted the attention and respect. Now the Brahma Devas have very profound samadhi and probably can see everything in samsara if they want to. Whatever they want to see in samsara they could see. But they could not see where the radiance that permeated Sariputta's mind was coming from. And that is because the Brahma Devas, if they are not yet attained to a state of liberation, are still working with conditions. But Sariputta was meditating on the unconditioned. So there was an occasion where Venerable Sariputta described to Venerable Ananda, the attendant of Lord Buddha, how he could enter a unique state of concentration in which he would not be cognizant of any familiar object of cognition. In regard to the earth element, he was without perception of earth, and also in regard to the other three elements, water, fire and wind, the four immaterial objects and everything else pertaining to this world or even to the world beyond, meaning the heavens. And yet he said he was not entirely without perception. His only perception was Nibbana is the cessation of becoming. So he's abiding in a kind of, I wouldn't even say it's a concentration, I would say he's meditating upon the liberated state. And the liberated state is empty, and yet there is something that knows that state. And it creates such radiance that 10,000 Brahma Devas come to revere it. So I think it's nice to find these short paragraphs and examples, because I do think it's important to have confidence in the goal and the wonderfulness of the goal. And it also correlates, curiously enough, I believe, to the Heart Sutra. Another name for the Heart Sutra is Prajna Paramita, the perfection of wisdom. So Sariputta, as the foremost disciple of Lord Buddha in wisdom, equal to the Buddha in wisdom, clearly has perfected wisdom. So we'll have a little look at the Heart Sutra and see if we can draw some parallels. Keeping in mind that Sariputta described that he could enter a unique state in which he would not be cognizant of earth element, water element, fire element, wind element, immaterial objects, or anything in this world or the world beyond. So he could abide in that state. Sometimes I believe this sutta is misunderstood when Lord Buddha gives permission for Avalokiteshvara to teach the highest teachings on emptiness. It's not because Sariputta doesn't understand it. It's because Sariputta delights in listening to wisdom. There are examples in the suttas where Sariputta came upon a monk and the monk didn't know it was Sariputta, and Sariputta asked him a question on Dhamma, and Sariputta listened to his long explanation, and Sariputta was blissful listening to his explanation because it was a correct explanation, and he praised the bhikkhu, can't quite remember his name, but there was this occasion where this bhikkhu explained his understanding to Sariputta, and Sariputta rejoiced and delighted in the wisdom because Sariputta is one who delights in wisdom. So I believe that Avalokiteshvara is talking about the ultimate nature of emptiness, addressing it to Sariputta as two friends, Dhamma practitioners. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when practicing deeply the Prajnaparamita, perfection of wisdom, perceived that all 5 khandhas are empty and was saved from all suffering and distress. And then he addressed Sariputta, form does not differ from emptiness, emptiness does not differ from form. That which is form is emptiness, that which is emptiness is form. The same is true of feelings, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness. So, I've attended some teachings by His Holiness the Dalai Lama where he explains how form is emptiness. If we understand that every single thing that you can see, any object, comes from other conditions. So, wood, a wooden floor, came from trees. The trees came from a sapling. The sapling came from a seed. The seed came from a previous tree. And the wood, even though we can't see it, in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, the wood is degenerating and disintegrating. So there is no inherent wood in wood. The whole thing is in flux. It's a convention, it's its current state. It came from other things. Even while it's appearing, it came from other things, other conditions. And even as it's appearing, it's already disintegrating. So that means its nature is emptiness. It's empty of solidity. It's not an unchanging plank of wood. And that's the same for everything. Any phenomena you can observe which is a condition has the same. So your body, and even your mind and your habits. Your body came from your mother and father, from water, from food. Your habits and your emotions came from the beings you were before. And there's no inherent, stable, solid, unchanging you. So because of that, you are of the nature of emptiness. So even as you appear, your true nature is emptiness, voidness. So when a practitioner begins to have very deep insights into this, they can abide in the awareness of voidness rather than being caught in the conventions. When we were saying the other day about how Lumpur Panyawado said that most beings are looking at the images on the projection on the screen, completely caught in the story and the drama. And he said a lot of practice is looking at the projector, having a look at what is it that's projecting this, self and others, past and future, and having a look at where the sense contact comes into contact with the sense bases and how we create a world out of that. So form is emptiness, emptiness is form. The same is true of feelings, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness. All dhammas are marked with emptiness. They do not appear or disappear. They were empty from the beginning. They are not tainted or pure, do not increase or decrease. Therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no colour, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind. So what we were just reading about Sariputta's meditation, we'll have a look again. When Sariputta was delighting in voidness, there was no awareness of the four elements. So the mind isn't giving attention to the body with its sense bases. Mind is still there. Mind is concentrated upon the nature of emptiness. And the devas can see the body radiating light. But the mind is experience an unconditioned, liberated state, which is so radiant, 10,000 Brahma devas came to pay respects. No eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. No colour, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch. No object of mind, no realm of eyes, and so forth until no realm of mind consciousness, no ignorance, and also no extinction of it, and so forth until old age and death, and also no extinction. No origination, no stopping, no path, no cognition, and no attainment with nothing to attain. The bodhisattvas depend upon the perfection of wisdom, and the mind is no hindrance. Without any hindrance, no fears exist. So, one Western monk once translated this brief version of the Heart Sutra to Luang Por Chah when he was visiting America, and he said, "This is an accurate description of ultimate reality." So that's very interesting. If you realized ultimate reality, and if the mind is liberated and abides in the ultimate reality, then even as these things appear, they're seen as not solid, not real. The empty nature has been completely penetrated, so that even as they appear, the liberated practitioner knows that they're empty. That's their deeper nature. The one criticism Luang Por Chah made was that the sutta talked about the goal, described the goal, but didn't give a description of the path that realizes that goal. And this is where I think the Theravada does a very good job. I've heard His Holiness the Dalai Lama say that the mantra itself at the end, Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhisoha, that is the instruction about how to realize the path. Go further, go even further beyond into Bodhi. What is Bodhi? Wisdom, knowledge. So, His Holiness the Dalai Lama said something very similar to what my own teachers say. The way to cultivate wisdom, speaking about the perfection of wisdom, is we have to listen. The three ways that we cultivate wisdom: we listen, we read, study, then we contemplate until we understand it properly, and then we meditate until we have direct insight into it. So, when you've perfected wisdom, everything will be perceived as empty, and your mind will be radiant and liberated and luminous, and devas will pay respects, and you won't think you're a self. But the question is, what about when things aren't empty? What about when they don't seem empty? What about when they don't seem radiant? And what about when it's not blissful? This is where it gets practical. This is where we have to be practical. So the first instruction, go towards Bodhi. That's where we are now. And then we have all our basic dhammas to practice, basic instructions, through practicing generosity, through making efforts to keep the precepts, having good ethical behavior, and having meditation disciplines, listening to Dhamma. We have our mental cultivation, so dana, sila, bhavana. That's how we go towards Bodhi. This basically means, I think what we have to do is we have to aim to increase From one level we can understand a concept and we can be inspired by it, and we can have our potential affirmed and we can feel happy about it. And one of the reasons I wanted to mention the Heart Sutra is many people chant it in Malaysia, but they chant it more as a devotional practice, and it's nice to give some consideration to what the actual meaning is, that it's a description of ultimate reality for somebody who has perfected wisdom. For those of us who have not perfected wisdom, we can't say that there is no path. For those of us who are going towards Bodhi, there is a clear path and we have to walk it. And sometimes we have to walk with little baby steps. And going towards Bodhi means increasing your efforts in a very practical, realistic, mundane way, a little bit at a time, without slipping back. And if you do slip back, then pull up your socks quickly, get up and re-establish your practices. Going further into Bodhi, so when you experience more frequent periods of Khanika Samadhi and more frequent experiences of Upajjhara Samadhi, the momentary concentration and the neighborhood concentration, and you're cultivating your mindfulness and wisdom, and you begin to have vipassana insights, so that's going further into Bodhi. And that's where the practice goes. And then the way it works, it is a path of conditionality. There is dependent co-arising. This exists because of this. There are causes. It's a path of cause and effect. So the Eightfold Path is a set of karmic causes. That's all karma. When we cultivate right view, we practice right speech, right thought, right livelihood. That's all stuff we're doing. Right mindfulness is something that we do. We practice being mindful correctly. We bring right samadhi to fruition, right concentration. So small amounts of samadhi is what conditions the causes for longer periods of samadhi, and those longer periods of samadhi is what causes stabilization of deep samadhi. Reflecting wisely, contemplating, meditating, having small insights, this is what lays the causes to later have bigger insights. Those bigger insights lay the causes for having profound liberating insights. And that's where we go from go beyond, go even further beyond. So this is when you will start to realize the unconditioned, have experiences of the liberated mind. Thanajananand, my teacher, talks about temporary liberations. So when the hindrances fall away from the mind and the self-view falls away from the mind, a practitioner can have an experience of a mind which is not oppressed by greed, hatred and delusion for a period of time. And this really does happen. And if it's not yet at the level where it destroys a critical mass of the kilesa and a person attains to a level of unshakable liberation, at the very least you can experience it. And that will be very helpful for your faith and for it becomes wisdom bharami. If it doesn't become an unshakable understanding that doesn't degenerate, it does become an experience that you remember that gives you great courage and confidence. So I think in this lifetime we should all aspire to have some vipassana insights. The way to do it is these kinds of retreats. In my experience, the times that I've had what I would consider to be genuine insight, it always has been when it's been an intensive period of practice. And then it's a matter of trying to integrate those insights into your daily life afterwards. So if you have the opportunity, this is being an 8-day retreat. Previously I've taught 9-day retreats. But if you can, set aside time in the future to try to have 2-week retreats, 1-month retreats. But this is a good foundation. Reading the questions, some people beginning to get light nimittas, radiance coming in the meditation. Some people having direct perception of the nature of bones and bones disintegrating. So you can see the practices that we're doing are the correct practices and they do bring these kinds of results. But for it to become an unshakable insight that doesn't degenerate, realistically we probably need more than 8 days. But this is correct practice and I'm pleased with the way everybody's practicing, and I just hope I hope that you set the deep aspiration and make a commitment to trying to find opportunities to practice longer in the future, with the intention of having some genuine insights, laying the foundation for your future liberation. When things get busy and tough in your daily life, this is where it gets gritty. This is where we have to remember our commitment to our precepts, because our precepts are, no matter how irritating or disappointing an experience might be, because the problem with feeling irritated or being disappointed is then we feel justified in expressing our dissatisfaction. So there's a worldly way of thinking about things, and then there's a wise way of thinking about things. So it's good, the retreat's ending tomorrow, so we have to put some thought into making some strong resolutions. If your mind wasn't ultimately empty with a blissful, radiant nature, then it might seem worthwhile becoming contentious. You can win some little battles in the short term. But since your mind does have a radiant, unconditioned, blissful nature, and since the way to realize that is by refraining from making bad karma and accumulating merit that will support the process, then we understand that restraining ourselves when we feel really irritated and upset is an investment in your enlightenment. So it's good to give some thought to that. It's like it's not worth it to express the emotion which gives you a feeling of relief in the moment. Understand that when you practice patience and you practice forgiveness, you're accumulating merits that are going to benefit you. So it doesn't matter what the other person does or did. Sometimes we do have to set firm boundaries. So I'm not saying that people should make themselves open to be abused. But we have to give a lot of thought to how does one set a boundary in a way which is skillful and assertive? How do you do that without becoming aggressive? It is possible. And this is actually right thought. Thinking about that is a skillful way of thinking. And then when you say it, that's right speech. This is the Eightfold Path. We have to work with karma. We have to make wholesome, skillful karmas, because that's what's going to support us to realize our own liberation. So don't place obstructions in your own path by becoming contentious with other people. So it's good to give some thought. Where are your areas of habitual reaction? Where would you like to do a bit better? Can you make some resolutions? And for other people it might not be irritation and aversion, it might be the sensuality. And Lord Buddha says that the most powerful of the kilesas is sexual lust. He said that if there were 2 kilesas this powerful, it would be impossible to be enlightened or liberated. Fortunately, there's only one. But it does go to show how strong it is. If you understand that sexual passion is the most powerful force binding you to the wheel of rebirth, you might want to give it some second thought when you think about having that affair. Not that any of you are thinking of having affairs, I'm sure. But there are other areas that we have to give attention to. So in these days with the internet, the way that it is, one can be unskillful with one's viewing in a way that feeds sexual passion. And you really want to give some thought to this. It is unfortunate that it is so easy. I remember when I was growing up as a teenager, I just basically couldn't have found a pornographic image if I wanted to. Just 30 years ago, I would have had to go to some sleazy bookstore in some scary suburb in some city a few hours away. But now people just need to search Google Images and there it is. So one needs, in this day and age, all of us need to have a clear sense of boundaries and a clear recognition of what is skillful, what is helpful, and what is genuinely harmful. Even if something becomes socially acceptable and common, it doesn't mean that it's not terribly harmful. So give some thought to that. Do you want to feed the energy and the power that binds you to birth, aging, sickness and death, separation from the loved, because that's what happens. Sometimes we need to have compassion if we have bad habits, and sometimes we need to admit that we need help. So some of these things are very addictive. With regards to pornography, I've been doing some study. It causes dopamine to release in the brain. So dopamine is the hormones related to pleasure. So if the whole brain is being flooded with pleasure hormones, and the person viewing is really getting off on that, but the thing is, it's totally addictive. So the human organism developed at a time where these things, and talking about our evolution as an organism, this didn't exist. So those pleasure centers related to the food that you want or getting the partner that you want, it was never really, in the past, just a few decades ago, it was never really the case that the organism could have access to that much stimulation and flood the brain with that much pleasure hormones. So it's a powerful thing, and it's an addictive thing, and as people who aspire to be liberated from samsara, you don't want to bind yourself to it with more and more and more chains. So be careful. You have to set some goals. What are you going to do to seal our practice of virtue, the 5 precepts? We can look at the nitty-gritty like a lawyer, and sometimes people think, what can I get away with? What do I have to keep, but what can I get away with? And if something doesn't quite fall into the 5 precepts, you justify it. I can get away with that. And actually, the point of the 5 precepts is to keep the mind cool and to keep it functioning on a genuinely human level. So if anything inflames the passions and makes the mind hot, you can be pretty sure it's not in the 5 precepts. It's against the 5 precepts in terms of a principle. So we keep the rules in letter and in spirit. So we understand when something is not in the spirit of the. And then if you're looking at intoxication, so drugs and alcohol which lead to intoxication, but these days you could add forms of entertainment. Any kind of internet viewing which is intoxicating, that could mean sensuality, that could also mean aversion. So apparently Donald Trump has received the most negative press of any world leader ever. 90% negative. The only appropriate response one could possibly have to Donald Trump is to hate him. If you watch mainstream media, that is the message, and I'm not going to speculate as to why, but I would say be careful. Be careful. Don't believe anybody who tells you that the appropriate response is to hate anybody. The problem is when you get a message repeatedly again and again and again and again, it seeps in. So you are Buddhist practitioners. You have a commitment to harmlessness and to loving kindness. And you do not aim ill will at anybody. Okay? Even Donald Trump. I'm going to lead you in a guided meditation. You're all going to dedicate merit to Donald Trump. It might be a first. Yes, you have to love Najib also. It doesn't mean that you can't see what's unskillful. If a person does something unskillful, their unskillful thoughts, their unskillful speech, their unskillful acts, that's their thing. But you don't add your ill will, your aversion, your hatred and your hostility on top of that. How could that possibly be helpful? So it's good to challenge this and set some boundaries with yourself. If looking at too much news media gives rise to negative mind states, a good thing to check is there a strong sense of self? When the passions get inflamed, really liking something and really not liking something, where you're making a lot of karma with self-view there. I love that guy, I hate him. The whole kind of Facebook thing, like, not like, not like, not like. It's liking and not liking that binds us to this ungratifying, unsatisfactory experience. So I really wish that there was an equanimous like, not like, in between, equanimous. Yeah, I don't care, I'm indifferent. I feel balanced about this. We have to make a Buddhist social media platform. I feel choices, metta, compassion, mudita, equanimity. Okay, skillful choices. I like it a little bit, middle way. So giving some thought. I often give this talk on the very last day, but I thought it'd be better to give it today so that you can actually give some thought before you get excited tomorrow and start thinking of all the things you're going to do when you escape the mountain. But I would like to encourage you to really set the intention deeply to do more retreats if you can. And Anandagiri Monastery now does have a retreat facility for people who have done retreats with either myself or Ajahn Pavro. That is the condition. So you now all qualify. And there is a minimum requirement. You have to be a minimum of 7 days, and you do have to make a commitment to meditate 5 times a day. So, and it won't be formal teaching. It will be basically coming to practice what you've already studied, what you've already learned. And I think this is very important, that we rely on teachers and we rely on retreat circumstances a few times. At a certain point you have to recollect what it is that you've already studied and already learned, because this is a way that it goes in deeper. And you have to motivate yourself, so then it becomes your virya, spiritual power, and your resolution, your determination, bharami, your effort. And so cultivating one's refuge. The Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha is a refuge externally, but it's also a refuge internally. So we have to cultivate the Buddha potential for liberation by practicing the Dhamma. And then practicing the Dhamma, that becomes a refuge in our minds. The degree to which we have mindfulness and wisdom, equanimity, metta, compassion, etc. This becomes our refuge, that cool, spacious, peaceful space that you can find in your mind. That's your refuge in Dhamma. And when you're practicing correctly, then you are Sangha. So you have to know some good monks and nuns first, read some teachings, get inspired, understand that you can cultivate yourself. This is our capacity as human beings. But then you actually have to join a team, sign up, and walk the talk. Gate, gate, paragate, parasangate, bodhisoha, go further into Bodhi. So I'm pleased with people's effort, and I've been happy to share what I've been able to share. And I just encourage you, you've got about 16 more hours, 5 or 6 more meditation sessions. At the end of your meditation session, make some aspirations. Be clear on the kind of liberation that you aspire for. If you are hoping to be an arahant as quickly as possible, be clear about that, because in the past people may have made vows, and if you have made vows that you have not yet relinquished, that will obstruct your liberation. So if you are very clear that you want to build bharami and become a great bodhisattva, well, then also you have to be clear about that and dedicate your merit in that way. Or if you aspire to be a great disciple, be clear about that. And if you can't decide, and if you haven't decided, that's also okay. But also be clear about that. And then you need to make aspirations like, I have to say this in Malaysia because it's such a diverse group, and I've read the questionnaires, and some people want to go to Tushita heaven, and some people want to be Buddhas, and some people aren't sure. But everybody wants to be born in a situation where they can continue to practice next life. So that's something we can all be clear about. May we be born in a place suppose you don't become an arahant this lifetime, and suppose you aren't completely liberated and beyond rebirth, then we have to make the aspiration to be born in a place where you meet the true Buddha Dhamma and well-practiced practitioners and teachers, and that you have the opportunity to practice and the inclination to practice. So when you meditate, even back in your lay life, you can make this, whatever your aspiration is, you need to make it repeatedly for it to gain momentum, so that at the time of death, that's been set in motion. It's like a track you've already laid before you. The mind is the forerunner. The mind becomes like what it gives attention to. And so we have to have a clear path. If you don't know the kind of liberation or the time of your liberation, you're not clear about that yet, because you have a compassionate inclination, you may wish to help more beings, then at least we can make the aspiration to grow in Dhamma. Every type of practitioner has to develop mindfulness, has to develop concentration, has to develop wisdom. So it's clear, the practice is the same. And we all need to be generous, and we all need to have ethical conduct. So all of that is clear. And then it's just a matter of how long will a practitioner practice for, and how many beings will they help along the way. That's a personal choice. But set those aspirations, at the very least, to continue practicing and keep meeting with these teachings. I'm confident that the effort you have put forth this week will have laid good seeds that will ripen in the future as more opportunities to practice and deeper levels of samadhi and deeper insights, and I rejoice and I wish you continued success. May you realize the ultimate empty nature and abide in blissful voidness, and may this be a benefit to all beings.